Hello there. Welcome in, everybody. I have David Khoshpasand here with me today, working over at Hasbro and previously over at Tenuity. But before I give too much away on your background, David, I'd like to welcome you in and ask you if you could give a little bit of background on your experience and your background.
Appreciate you all having me. Super happy to be here. Big fans of your podcast and the content you provide, first of all. So name's David. Appreciate you introducing me. I've been working on Amazon since around 2017. Background's mainly focused in marketing and brand marketing. Once I, really dived into Amazon, that's where the analytical side started to kind of emerge and become front and center. From there, I also taught consumer behavior at Mary Baldwin University part-time, and learning the research and the purchasing decisions that customer make was really intriguing with me, along with the psychology. And then taking that knowledge really and diving into search at Tenuity. I was there for almost 2 years, and then now I'm super excited to be at Hasbro and apply all the knowledge that we've gained so far into their ecosystem and to figure really how to excel in toys and games.
It's incredible. It's very rare we get someone on that is, experienced in the PPC role as much as us. So it's exciting to talk with you. And, you come from the brand side as well, which it's like the best of both worlds, the people we work with, as well as doing our own role.
I wanted to pull up our LinkedIn and figure out when we first got connected, because it's been a while. And all I know is every time I got a message from you, it would be you and I going back and forth for 45 minutes on like some absolutely in-depth, ridiculous strategy. Like, everyone out there is posting about match types and ad types. And then David and I are like diving into like impression share forecasting and figuring out how to do like better budget distribution. So I'm always super excited, and even more so now that you can kind of tie in that knowledge on the brand side, working with a complex catalog like you're doing, and you're having to get a lot more incremental and manage that relationship from a completely different viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And the conversations that we've had reaching out to you, the one aspect that I took from Kobe Bryant, and I was like a basketball fan and followed him, he always asked questions. And I always thought, never be scared to ask the best people in the field like what their opinion is. And that's exactly why I reached out to you was, I would just pose these questions, say, hey, what's your point of view? What's your opinion on this, to help me contextualize some of the thoughts that I'm having and get better. So I appreciate you even taking the time to, to provide feedback. And now we've, built a relationship, which is nice. And I appreciate that as well.
Of course, we've came full circle, and now we're about to take all of that value and hopefully give it to our listeners and our LinkedIn audience, because I know you have a lot to bring today.
Awesome. Yeah. Happy to share a lot. Just let me know if we want to dive into some of the topics we discussed earlier, or what would you like to do?
Yeah. Just before we got recording, David was talking to us and we were really excited getting into it. So we were talking a little bit about planning and forecasting, more or less. So I'd love for you to kind of open up and talk to us about your experience on the brand side with doing exactly that.
Yeah. So the main initiative that I'm put into place as my role in Hasbro is figuring out how to set the right strategic goals and to create a framework. Bill Gurley, who's like a super famous investor in the Silicon Valley, he talks about frameworks and having a right framework in place that everyone can share the same language and it's crystal clear. The framework that me personally, that I've done research and that I enjoy a lot, is the Alchemy of Growth. And it was written by the McKinsey research company. And with that, I'm trying to conjoin that with Measure What Matters, which is a book wrote by John Doerr, and he talks about objectives and key results. So putting those two together. And the reason why I say planning is so important is because if you don't have the right framework in line, essentially everyone doesn't have focus. They're not aligned. And the things that we're tracking may not be as important. And hence the book, Measure What Matters. With that, I can kind of give a brief overview of what the Alchemy of Growth even is, what it means. And then I would love, after that brief overview, get your feedback. And then maybe we could see, how to strategically map out or tactically what listeners could do for their own brands, or even as an agency, and proposing some of this idea to their partners. So the Alchemy of Growth really is broken down to 3 horizons. You have your horizon 1, which is focused on your bottom line results, your profitability. So this is what we typically think of as ROAS. And then we have our second horizon is focused on top line sales growth. Now, this is more about, revenue. It's about market share. The ROAS is not the primary metric. In fact, in this Horizon 2, experimentation and investment are needed in order for this Horizon 2 to succeed. And it's not to say that profitability is not accountable as this. It's just not the primary metric. It's that same saying that says nothing will kill this Horizon 2 initiative faster than measuring it for success like you would this Horizon 1, right? And we've heard like the ROAS gel and all these, situations about trying to steer clear of that. In this model, it does. And then Horizon 3 is like your big bet, your seed growth, paraphrasing here, but Warren Buffett said, someone sitting underneath the shade of a tree that was planted long ago. So we need to think about the future and what investments can we make. That could be sweat equity if there's a bootstrap company. It could be a lot of different ways we look at this. Because this model is applied for business, but I take it and I apply it to media. You can apply it to any type of system. And the reason why I was saying, well, what's the value of the system is because the study that they did was saying, why aren't all companies growing sustainably? Like, what's stopping them? And what they found is 6 common patterns. I'll give you 2 examples. So one, if you're so focused on your core business and you're thinking about how can you extend and defend your core business and you're neglecting the future and your future initiatives, then what happens when those start to die off, you don't have any business in the pipeline to have a growth engine that'll take place of this current business, right? So that's one instance. And then on the flip side of that, if you're so future oriented, then what happens is you don't have the financial capacity to provide that investment to carry over this emerging business that you've created that's providing really good market position and it's gaining market share, but now you just can't fund it. You don't have the money to keep funding it. So there's this balance. And what they said in their thesis is all 3 of these horizons need to be managed concurrently. So there should be a point when we're planning goals and we're setting strategies or we're even managing the day to day. We should be thinking about today's core business, the emerging business, and then also big bets all at the same time. And we should be having conversations around that and then setting goals. So that's pretty much the overview. For now, how it conjoins with Measure What Matters is, and then I'd love your feedback, is essentially in the book so far, I'm like halfway through, but what I really like about it was Andy Grove, who was the former CEO of Intel. He's the first one to introduce this, and he just called it, objectives and key results. Objectives, what do you want to accomplish? And the key results is how. But the 4 key pillars is focus, align, track, and stretch. The focus part is really key because what exactly do we want to accomplish? We said in an earlier conversation and bringing here is like, when you look at your organic versus paid traffic and sales, what do you want to do with this amount of paid media that's coming in? What do you want to accomplish? Let's get very clear on that first. So you have that focus. Could be, top line revenue growth, could be a Horizon 2 more initiative. Could be about really tightening things in and focusing on that core business. But whatever, if you get very clear on that. So then that second part, when you align on it, it's crystal clear. There's a quote in it that I really liked, and I'll kind of paraphrase. And it says, collective agreement maximizes achievement. And what it really means is when we're a brand and we're aligned perfectly with the agency and we're both speaking the same language, when I talk to them about the 3 horizons, they know exactly what I mean. When I talk to them about the objectives and key results within each horizon, know exactly what I'm talking about. We're speaking the same language. We're all aligned, and that's going to maximize productivity instead of always guessing. Or the objective is like muddy, and we're not exactly clear. Grow incremental sales. What does that mean? We know exactly what that means and how it maps out into which business initiative. So that's the kind of the overall. I would love some of your feedback on that because I know it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fantastic. There's 2 things that have really stood out from my experience with both models and my experience on the agency side. One, not issue. The one thing I've personally struggled with applying the traction style OKR model, the objectives and key results, is e-commerce moves so quick, so quick. And that's where I think you calling out the first aspect of setting those horizon goals that can be judged, success can be judged on a longer time frame, right? Let's look at 12 months. Let's look at our full goals for the next 3, 5, 10 years. And then kind of layering in a quicker OKR models, how I feel. I know that there's many times, especially dealing with like the COVID catalyst in e-commerce where, okay, we sold out of all of our inventory in 45 days, or we had this TikTok go viral and we had to completely change everything. So I know that's been something that I feel like I haven't fully figured out how to deal with, is just how quick e-commerce moves and how we're going to have to be so much better at goal setting and alignment, because the whole business can change in 6 to 12 months nowadays. I mean, we've seen so many of the largest enterprise companies finally start fully investing in e-commerce. They have no idea how to set up their teams. So they're reaching out to us and the Tenuities and the VMLs and all the large agencies. They're going to them like, hey, I don't know this platform. I hired my youngest person on a team. Please help us set goals and objectives. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we can do that, but I need to know what those horizons are. I need to know what, as a business, you're trying to achieve before I can ever give feedback on those objectives. And that synergy and alignment from agency brand side is not fantastic in the space on the e-commerce side, because both sides don't know enough about the other person's business. Brand side doesn't know enough about e-commerce to understand expectation setting. And agency side doesn't know enough about the brand's actual horizons and objectives to really deliver on those.
Yeah, that's great insight. And so we know that based on what I'm hearing is the e-commerce retail space adapts and moves quickly, and that the responsiveness to that can be challenging, is what it sounds like. And I've experienced that myself. And you're right, that transparency with the brand that you're working with is vital. And the transparency with the agency to say, hey, look, this is what would you rather spend your time doing? Because some of the things that I really pulled into is like, I really would enjoy having more conversations around strategy than performance, because I can see the performance and I can gather my own insights. Would it be more productive for us to have conversations around planning, because this landscape is evolving very quickly, and how do we adapt? I think conversation around that and honesty is important. And then to your point about like having plans in place, because you're right, things happen and then all of a sudden you don't have stock, which is, you know, it happens to all of us. It happens to different brands, and it can be challenging. When you have that horizons in place, I think that's why it's important to say, hey, look, these are the key challenges that I can expect in my core business. And that growth engine that we're trying to pull towards hopefully can help offset when that happens. And that's why we're trying to manage this concurrently, so we can think about, hey, in case things happen today, there's things in place tomorrow that'll help us until our core business starts to lift back up again. But you're right, you brought up a lot of good points. And I think this is some of the challenges that we're all working through. The second part I would say to that is, with objectives and key results, your objective could theoretically stay the same. Your key results should evolve. And it's a process of trial and error, right? Like when I told the agency when we were first putting in place, I was like, this is the first time we're putting this framework together. This is something that we're going to evolve together. There's going to be some trial. There's going to be some error. We're going to hit some bumps. But at the end of this framework, when we gather it, next year is going to be better. And the year after that's going to be better, because we're trying to find this long-term relationship where we can build this trust, but we can also build a framework in place where we're all aligned on and we're all focused on, we can track. So I would say, hey, like get the agency's feedback and the brand's feedback together and say, when these things do happen, we need to consider if our key results of how we're accomplishing this goal needs to evolve. And maybe it needs to change for a week. Maybe it needs to change for a quarter. But we need to think about this objective that we're trying to get, and we should be able to be fluid, because to your point, the e-commerce it flows and it goes and it hits and it waves and it crashes. And we need to be fluid in our approach instead of so like, you know, brick and mortar fixed and this is the planogram and this is how we're doing it.
Did anyone here expect a 14-year-old with access to a TikTok account to have so much power over e-commerce? I mean, they got post one video and you could sell out of all of your inventory in one day. And that is insane.
It is incredible. And you're right. Like
it's a fun dynamic.
It's definitely evolved, and the consumer has way more power than they did in the past, and influence not only through communication, but the way that products being moved. And it's an exciting time. But to your point, it brings a great deal of variability that can be you just didn't expect. So good points made.
So within each of those three horizons, I have to imagine you you're measuring them very differently, right? You're measuring your focus, core initiatives today very differently than your growth, future investments. And I imagine accountability has to be different across those. So how do you, kind of a half question of how do you get your team to buy in across these initiatives? And then two, how are you measuring across all of these? I guess I should call them horizons.
Yeah, horizons. Yeah. So the first round is you or your team just brainstorming on exactly what these could be and what objectives you want to accomplish and then run it by the agency and get that collective buy-in about this is right, this is wrong, this is where we could be, gray area. So for me personally, the way I tried to set it up was thinking about that horizon one profitability, saying, and you'll see all this feeds into this one horizon, saying, hey, look, at the end of the day, we have to hit a ROAS goal of X. Okay. No matter what. So that's one pillar of horizon one. The second one could be, based on productivity. And this doesn't even have to go, straight into ads. You could think about this in operations. If your supply chain is just not optimized, that could be one way that you can increase productivity. If your A+ page on certain ASINs are not up to par, and the conversion rate. I mean, Destiny does an awesome job of pointing out the fact that if you go to brand metrics and you start to look at the conversion rate, you can start to glean some of these insights. Is it optimal? No, that should be a goal, right? So, and feed all the way up to me so productivity is, and how I think about efficiency. There's different things that I've done on the account where we've increased efficiencies and I'd like to maintain some of that. But profitability and productivity, I would say to start to noodle on that. And that's how you measure it. The second horizon could be, because we're talking about top line sales growth, market position, market share, where do you really want to make an impact where you can grow? And then think about, what does that measurement look like? And then you can have secondary measurements where you're saying, what happened to the business after I made these changes? The cautionary tale that I would provide in this is, in the book, it says staircase to growth, small measured steps. So when you really want to take these big business leaps in terms of like, where do I want to grow in the future? Try to take these small measured steps of saying, hey, look, I really want to increase my glance views. How do I go about that? I'm not going to measure ROAS on that, right? The ROAS could be like a 1, right? And maybe you say, hey, look, as long as it's a 1, it's acceptable, right? But my goal here is to really drive category terms and consideration and clicks. And clicks and glance views is my primary metric for, like, let's say this example. Another one could be, revenue driven, and you're really trying to push revenue and measuring revenue for that. The third one for the big bets, that one, it can get a little messy when you're trying to pull in what the prime metric, because it's a big bet. And so for example, like if you were invested in a technology company and you were Amazon and you purchased this startup, like over the next 5 years, what does that look like? Throughout the book, they talk about the percentage or rate of conversion, and new customer acquisition and top line sales growth. So a little bit of what that Horizon 2 looks like is just with a little bit more like understanding and compassion that this could completely fail. Like we could do a big bet and it could do nothing, and that should be okay. And it's not irresponsible, because what we're trying to do is take chances. I mean, the one example that I really like that I heard from Bill Gurley talk was, he said that Jeff Bezos early on would put this experiment in place where he had Uber do a same day delivery as an experiment, and did that for a little while until they could prove it through. And there was not some success to begin. There was a lot of challenges. And the point that Bill Gurley made was, how many companies do you know that were bringing in 100 or more a million in revenue would do experiments like this? And because he said, big companies, they do a test. If it doesn't work the first time, it's done. He said the reason startups succeed is because when they do the first test and it doesn't succeed, they do it again, they do it again, they do it again, because it has to stick. So they get more shots at goal. So starting to think about, like, if you do a test and it doesn't work the first time, don't stop. Maybe run it again. Because if you think about it, is that one test truly representative of the outcome that we're trying to reach? Because if you did a sample size of anything in marketing research, you can't make a generalization based off one sample set. It's only an indicator. So thinking about that, and maybe some of those measurements and context that I provided could help guide the way. If you're having trouble even thinking about what should I do within a horizon, Blue Ocean Strategy had this nice framework where it basically said eliminate, reduce, raise, or create. So if you're thinking about that in your core business, what in my core business can I eliminate for productivity? What can I reduce? That could be, supply chain costs, negotiations, whatever the case may be. It could be bids, right? And then we're thinking about what can we raise because we want to extend the business. And maybe we've built a profitability and we just haven't been, bullish enough and we're raising the bids or, whatever the case may be. And then altogether, what should we create? And that's like a completely new product, completely new line. Maybe we focus too much on brand extensions and we haven't brought something new to the market that needs. So there's some different ways of looking at it.
That's awesome. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. and when people hear this, when you hear this for the first time, the thing I would encourage you is, just buy the books and read them because there's so much deep context into it and so much learnings. And these are just the key takeaways that I took from it. And you might read it and take something completely else and it just like enhances your business and, could potentially like 5 to 10x. It's all about like, how do you interpret it?
It's also so dependent on like right time and the situational aspect, like you mentioned. Like the principles that you're going to apply on brand side are going to be a lot different than on agency side where you are having to deal with so many different shareholders, right? So maybe you do have to have more flexibility, but on brand side, your stakeholders need that consistency and long-term growth. So I think that's something like the original Intel book, I read a lot of Google's initial documentation on like building operational success. And it's so interesting how that changes with growth or over time. And I think that's the part that people mess up on. They take something like traction model, they take all the different operating systems and they want it to apply perfectly in their business. And when it doesn't, they stop. And that's not the right way to look at it. You got to find the key pieces that align with the size and the goals that you're trying to achieve and then make it work for what you're trying to go after. Yeah,
that's a fantastic point. And I think that goes back to the point where it's just like, the first time you fail, don't stop. And,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you all have heard of this dude named David Goggins before, yes. But you heard of him? At this point, maybe he's like a household name, but he doesn't call them failures. He calls them attempts. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's a good way to reframe it to, anytime when I was at the agency and I would provide email feedbacks, I would say wins and opportunities. I never said, this is what went right and this is what went wrong because I'm like, this is what I see happening. And here's an opportunity to where we can make this better in the future. So, I mean, the way you look at things can change your life, can change a business, can change a partnership.
100%. One of the things that I think made a big difference in us early on is we read, like I said, most of those models, and it was like 4 of us. Like we're sitting here trying to have like L10 meetings and run off OKRs with 4 people on our team. And I had this of like, no, this does not make sense. Like we need flexibility. We're wearing 78 hats. Like we can have our original objectives, but we then read the Netflix model, no rules. And that just aligns so much with also the people you have on your team. Yeah. Like you have organizations that are going to be very systematic and, that's what caused them to scale to that point. They need to have very specific SOPs. They don't have a lot of flexibility. Then you're going to have organizations that are maybe more strategic. And like knowing how to create operating system for those different models, I think is incredibly important because it's all dependent on your people. Do you have systems people, integrators? Do you have more visionaries? How does that department break out? Like there's so much variability and complexity that even just something as simple as goal planning can become so much more complex. 100%.
And the framework that I'm providing today is like the passion that I have for, hey, this is my personal journey of saying that I really like alchemy of growth and measure what matters, and I'm trying to conjoin them. I don't think everyone should just, that's what I want to copy. Like everyone should follow their passions and saying, hey, look, this is the insight because at the same day, you're just going to be a potential clone of something else. Now we should take models that work and apply them to our business. I think that's perfectly fine. But you're right. Like if you tried to take a screw and try to put it in a nail, whatever the case, trying to build an analogy here, it doesn't fit, right? You have to do what's fit. And what does that company culture feel like, or, for your business and the people? And they're like, we gave this an honest try, and, we attempted this 3 times and it's just not really sticking. It doesn't feel right. What parts of it did feel right and what part of it didn't? And then you get inspired. Like you said, you read the Netflix book and you got inspired and you're like, wait a second, this might actually feel a lot more productive for us, and then go with that. And I think life is about experimenting and learning and, figuring out, getting real meta now, but we don't, trying to figure out what all this is. And, we're all trying to take our best guess at it. And I think really being true to yourself and figuring out what works for you is important.
Yeah, completely agree.
That's amazing. Well,
Justin, what you got?
On that note, that's like such an uplifting note to kind of wrap up on. I want to bring it back to where we started with asking about the differences between Tenuity and the brand side now, agency versus brand side. Like what are your favorite things about working on the brand side now in Hasbro specifically? And what are some of the biggest things you miss on the agency side, working with brands?
Yeah. So for the brand side, I think what's exciting for me is that I'm able to really dive into more ASIN level performance and get a better understanding of merchandising strategy in general. You have different occasions for how should we merchandise this brand, this product, and how does it fit for someone who's planning to buy and not planning to buy, and what happens during these certain occasions. And there's a lot of complexities that happen at the scale of Hasbro in the toys and games industry, which, and I mentioned earlier, when I was at the agency, a lot of times the brands would provide you the ASINs and saying, hey, look, this is the ASINs that we want to work with. Can you provide the best strategy for it? And I would say, absolutely. So it's really nice for me. I'm growing personally and professionally to really gain that insight into the merchandising strategy, which I think is important because I just think it makes you just overall enhances your point of view. It just widens the scope when you're really thinking about problem solving. On the agency side, what I thought was cool is you get so much exposure to different categories. So, I was working in, for coffee, I was working in soda, I was working in, this top line, CPG company. And I had so much exposure to different places on Amazon that was intriguing. And you could see what was working in one CPG and see if, was working in another one. And the landscape was just so wide that it was enjoyable. It was really fun. Just at that level of exposure and just day to day, it was like chopping at what's going to be. I think that was exciting. Yeah,
no, I can definitely speak to that. I mean, I'm sure Destiny can as well. The view we get over the whole landscape on Amazon and e-commerce as a whole is great, and something that as a seller, you might be scratching your head saying, are other sellers saying the same thing I am? So It's great to see on our side, but it's also great on your side too, with getting to actually manipulate the listing and understand, if I pull this lever, what happens to my sales, my new to brand customer rate, versus on the ad side, you can only tell the brands that and hope they, do with it what they will.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, man, and I told people at Hasbro this, like when in 2016, 17, 18, I would go to the New York Toy Fair and I would see their booth and I would be like, oh my God. I'm like, there's the Power Rangers and there, there's all these awesome toys. There's Nerf and there's Play-Doh and there's all these games that I play. And I was just in awe. And I was like, man, I hope one day, how cool would it be if I was working for them and I was able to, really be at a business at that level of scale. And I'm just super lucky and grateful that I can do it because I'm like a, kid adult. I still, love toys and, I can't wait till the new Indiana Jones comes out. Like I'm still that kid at heart. So for me, this is, right place to be.
Oh, 100%. I can't lie. I was scrolling the Hasbro site before this and spotted a couple NBA action figures that look pretty cool. So I'm right there with you, man. Awesome. You're always a kid at heart.
That's right.
That intersection of passion and career and excitement is always a really fun place to be, regardless of where it's at, what you're doing. I think if you can, everyone who's been listening to the first 25 minutes of this, you are very passionate about project management and the operating systems and what it takes to be successful, because if you weren't, who would take the time to learn that much? And I think that is a real testament to being able to combine all of those factors. I think it's going to be really great for you in the next few years. Thank
you so much, Destiny. I appreciate you saying that.
And thank you for sharing it with everyone. Like, I think when Justin and I came together and we were talking about what a podcast would look like, the most simple direction was Amazon advertising. And I was like, I've been doing content on Amazon ads for like 4 years now. How do we provide a unique angle for all of the different ways there are to be successful? So we really wanted to hit brand side pretty hard, because we have you on here talking about what's helped you be successful in your role, how you've built out this planning and forecasting system within Hasbro. And then, we have Nestle on talking about like product innovation and how that works. And like, there's so many different aspects. And yeah, it's really niche. It's not a generalist podcast, but the value you've brought's been incredible. So thank you for even joining.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And thank you, Justin, and everyone, for just having me on. Like I said, I'm a fan. I read the LinkedIn post, I listen to the podcast, and it's helped me grow professionally. So thank you. And please keep putting out the content because it's helpful.
Thank you so much for the kind words. We'll definitely have to have you back later this year.
Awesome. I would love that. Thank you.